Hi everybody, Carol here. Today I'm going to make a card using the Stampin' Up! Stamp set called Snowfall and another one called Polar Bears and another one that's a Merry Christmas stamp. I'm not a dealer, never have been, but I have a lot of their products and I like them. So we're going to start off by stamping the snowflakes and one polar bear, or one stamp of a polar bear. I'm going to cut my paper. I make an A6 card, which is 6 1/4 by 4 1/2. I start off by cutting it to 9 inches so that I can fold that in half to get the 4 1/2 inch measurement. So with an 8 1/2 by 11 sheet of paper, I have scraps left over, and I use them. I do not throw them away. So I'm cutting here down the middle of the 9-inch strip so that I can have two separate white pieces of paper. Then I'm going to use this medium blue, and I will cut it 4 1/2 by 6 1/4 by 4 1/2, two 4 1/2 sheets of paper. And then I'm going to have some little strips, and I'm cutting them 4 1/2. Now I'll go back to my scoreboard. This is a Martha Stewart, and score it right down the middle at the 4 1/2 mark. I have that marked on my score pal, and or score, whatever it is. And then I am folding it, mashing that fold in with my bone folder, which is wooden, and putting it under a very heavy book to mash that flat for a while. Now I'm going to stamp my stamps with VersaFine Onyx Black ink. It's my favorite. It makes a very good crisp line. It is pigment ink, so it takes a little longer to dry, but it is so worth it to me. And I have the refills, so I keep it going all the time until I guess it just finally falls apart, and then I'll have to buy a new ink pad. But anyway, so I'm stamping. I usually stamp extras just in case I need them or want them for a future card, or if I'm going to make multiples of anything. Then I'm going to stamp the sentiment, Merry Christmas, and I start off stamping in the corner, up in a corner, so that it will help me to line the stamp up better, and try to get it straight without having to go back and cut it out to get it straight. There I'm using the light blue ink, and I flip that around so I can use the other corner, and that just helps me to line it up. So this time I'm using a darker blue. I believe that's navy. And so I wanted to experiment with the different colors. I can use that on other cards if I don't use it today. And going back to my corner again. And then that gives you options to play with different colored ink. A lot of times I use different colored background paper behind those strips. Now I'm going to do my snowflakes, and there are 4 snowflakes stamps in this set, and my lighter blue that matches the paper was just about out, so I stamped it onto both ink pads. The other one is darker and has more ink on it, so I thought they were close enough in color that I wasn't concerned about contaminating one ink pad over the other. And but I'm holding it down, giving it pretty good pressure to hope to get a good impression, and I think it turned out just fine. But just that one ink pad alone, I don't know if I had a refill for it or not, but it probably would not have made a good enough impression just by itself. So this way, it's worked out just fine. Now I'm taking the second stamp, which is a bolder stamp and a little bit smaller, and maybe not so much. And so then I'm filling it in. No, I don't believe it is any smaller. I thought it was. And then filling in with that. Now here comes the third stamp, which is smaller. And I'm doing the same thing with the 2 different inks. And then you start filling in and trying to fill in the page. Of course, you can always experiment at first on scrap paper, see what you can do, where you need to move the individual stamps, what makes it work. This one of those sheets of paper is smaller than the other, and so that's why they don't fit exactly the same. But anyway, I'm making a background. Then I decided to go back and fill that corner in with the lacy snowflake, which it seems filigree to me, you know, with the really pretty details. And I'll just have a tiny bit to fill in that big corner up there. Turn the stamp where you get the most use out of the space. And then here is the fourth and final stamp of snowflakes, and they are little bitty ones, and I think there are 3 on the stamp, and there are, and so you just maneuver them around and fill in those white spots. I don't think it has to all be filled in. I think it's pretty to have some of that white, leave it alone and leave it there, and it makes a pretty airy look. So I'm going back, twisting and turning the stamp different directions, using one little snowflake if you have to off the corner of the page, and of course put some scrap paper back behind that so it doesn't get all off on your desk or your big mat back there behind you, and whatever you use. And it's just about filled in. So now I'm going back to my polar bears that have been stamped and dried, and I'm going to cut them out. And on any other card you could stamp them directly onto the paper, but since I had the snowflakes back there, I'm going to cut these out and go back and glue them in. So I will speed it up so that you don't have to sit there and watch all of that. And I moved the white paper so there'd be more contrast behind you and you could see it better with the contrast color in the background. I'm going back to color in his little scarf, and it's a Prismacolor, and I think it's cerulean blue, and it's almost the color of those snowflakes, even though they're not color coordinated, they're not by the same company, but it's almost the exact same blue. And then I colored in the little one's scarf with the green. Now I decided to put him up on a mountain, so I just hand sketched off what would replicate a mountain or an iceberg, whatever, and I just traced around it with the cerulean blue rather than a hard pencil line. And because I'm going to go back and put a little bit of blue color on there anyway, this time I'm using a light blue ink pad and an old stencil brush that I got. I have no idea where. It really is a stencil brush, but it works all right, and I'm just brushing it on to that line. And it takes a while to get more color with the stencil brush than you would with like a face sponge or something like that, makeup sponge. But if you want just a light look, that's not bad. It's not a bad way to do it. And so I'm going to cut it out, leaving extra space so that I can slide it around and play with where I want those higher peaks to be and the lower slopes to be. And then it is pretty light, so I went back and put that scrap piece of paper under there for some protection and put a little more ink on with stencil. And then I thought, well, you know, I can even use the makeup sponge in this case and go around the edge and give it a dark edge and a finished edge. And it doesn't show much, but it does help. And then after I did that, I also took it and I went around the background paper just to give it off a finished off look. I like to have that finished edge, and the makeup sponges work just fine for me. So after it's all done, I put it down for its gluing I use Tombow liquid glue because it's repositionable. So I put it on there and I set it off to dry for a little while. It goes on white, and then after a few minutes it dries clear, and then that's what makes it repositionable. And I love this glue. So now here we are. I've waited a few minutes, gone off and done something else. You can actually wait till the next day if you want to. It'll be just fine. And so I'm gluing that down. And then I'm going to bring in my heel, or my iceberg, and my polar bears, and put them down. And then I realized it wasn't glued. I had not glued that piece yet, but it's okay because I could see where I wanted to place it. I'll go back and glue it later, but I can see where the overhang is. And take my scissors and cut that part off. Easy enough to follow the edge of the paper. And it will be ready to go, except for the sentiment, Merry Christmas, with that blue background I cut out earlier, that strip 4.5 wide. Then glue that piece on with the blue writing that says Merry Christmas. Here's another one, very similar, but without the heel or the iceberg. So, and I decided to try another one and use a different stamp for Merry Christmas. So there you are. Play with your ideas. Come up with something different. And one of them you can see has a blue background. That's the one where I cut the white paper smaller. And please come back and join me in a few days. I'm going to try to put videos out every few days. And at the end, I put in a card to use some ideas of your own, maybe with your rectangular dies, and do something different with that same card or that same stamp.